we're not related to them.
Welcome to the July 21st, 2017 edition of Colorado Inside Out Postgame, a special web exclusive production here on Channel 12. Let's get a quick take on the life and times of former Colorado U.S. Senator Gary Hart being chronicled in an upcoming film. First reported by Westward, but we're covering it now, portrayed by Hugh Jackman, Frontrunner will tell the story of Hart's controversial 1988 Democratic presidential campaign. Patty Calhoun of Westward, first of all, I want to be sure you have credit. Westward was the first organization to report this, and Hugh Jackman getting this sweet gig.
It's not a Pulitzer. Let's just say that right now.
What do you think about this? I mean, Hugh Jackman's a pretty big star to be playing a pivotal time in Colorado history that maybe some people have maybe forgotten how big of a crash this indeed was. Your thoughts?
Well, and Jackman's an Australian song and dance man too, and Wolverine. So we'll see how he plays Hart. I think people forget just how charismatic Hart was when he was running campaigns back in '72, and then he decided to run, became a senator, decided to run first in '84 and then '88 until he got sunk by the monkey business. There's a great book by Matt Bai, which is what this is based on, and it's a fascinating story about how much running a campaign has changed, how much the media has changed. This was one of the really first big sex scandals that sank a candidacy. It almost seems quaint now, almost 30 years later, to have something like this sink a candidacy when everyone else can just go out and confess things. Unfortunately for Gary Hart, he said, follow him and you'll be bored, and the Washington Post and the Miami Herald weren't.
David Copel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. Gary Hart's demise in the 80s was epic. He went on to be a pretty significant statesman from Colorado, but I think Penny hit a good point. There were some significant parts of this fall from grace that really seem to trigger a whole lot of changes in how we look at politics and the media. Is this a movie you'll be interested in watching?
Well, yes, because I lived through it in real life. I was an ardent Hart volunteer in both '84 and then '87, '88. Since Hugh Jackman's from the comic world with Wolverine, let's use the Earth 2 concept. And on Earth 2, Gary Hart won that presidential election in 1988. So we didn't have George H.W. Bush, who a decent man, but turned out not to be a very good president. And he was such a bad president that he lost his reelection to the Clinton crime family, with all the destruction of this country's morals and decency that has followed from it for the next quarter century. So you just imagine the 2 terms of Gary Hart, this country would be in way, way, way better shape than we are on Earth 1.
It took getting to an entire different Earth universe to the Clinton crime family, but yeah, you got there. It was a long way around the barn, but you got there, David. I appreciate that. Eric Sonnen, political analyst. This was a big deal across the nation and, of course, here in Colorado. What kind of movie do you think this will be? I mean, it's certainly not. Well, maybe not say certainly. I don't know how you make it a happy ending. It's certainly, is it more of a Shakespearean tragedy? What do you think?
A happy ending.
Easy, John. Sorry.
I have no idea what kind of movie it will be. I don't know who's directing it. Time will tell on that. I love the kinds of games David just played, the what ifs, where and then one thing flows from another. So you have no George H.W. Bush, probably no Bill Clinton, because it'd be a President Gary Hart running for re-election, whether successfully or not, in '92. And if there's no George H.W. Bush, there's probably not a George W. Bush as well. So you can play those games forever. I think we sometimes forget of how close to the presidency Gary Hart perhaps was. Front runners, and he was the front runner after getting beat in 1984 by Walter Mondale with the Where's the Beef. He became the front runner in 1988. Front runners more often than not always, but more often than not win the nomination. A presidency, as we just saw after 8 years of Barack Obama, the White House usually changes hands after 8 years. It is completely plausible that Gary Hart could have been president of the United States circa January 1989. I think Patty hit it, you've hit it, Dominic. Gary Hart was caught in the changing morality. He was right at the cusp of those times. 4 years later, Bill Clinton survived those kinds of scandals. These days, not only would the monkey business, the boat not be a scandal, or at least not sink a presidential campaign, but the candidate would probably invite Billy Bush on the boat with them. Times change. I do think Hart will go down as a sort of a tragic figure, given the size of his brain, the level of charisma, and yet that fatal flaw that was only fatal in that window of time and not 4 or 8 or 20 years later.
And let's not forget a politician who was talking about global terrorism, Islamic terrorism, for many, many years before anybody else was talking about it, before Osama bin Laden was headlines around the entire world. John Bowman, reporter of 5 Points News. You had a little bit of a preview of my unfortunate word choice and the question to Eric. Hugh Jackman, a big story. It's going to be a big movie. Gary Hart, a pivotal figure in Colorado history. Your thoughts?
Couple of lessons. You never challenge the media. You just never challenge the media. You never say, follow me. You know, if you think I'm cheating, follow me. You can't do that. He was a cheater. I don't think he would have got 2 terms. He would have done something else in that first term, very reminiscent of what's going on right now with Trump. I mean, he was a womanizer, and you just can't have that.
Yeah, because there's never been a successful president
No,
womanizer.
never.
Okay. We did reference Calvin Coolidge earlier, so I mean, there was maybe 1 or 2. That's all the time we have for Colorado Inside Postgame this week. Leave us a comment, tell us what you think. For everyone here at CPT12.org, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks very much for watching.